What's up, gangos? How you been? I've been chilling. Nonetheless, in this video, I want to talk about the idea of success recovery. It's such an interesting concept because I've read about it, and I recently watched a podcast about this author who won all these awards that he wanted to win, and then he talked about how that year where he was just on top of the world, winning everything, he's at all these webinars and thing, was one of the worst years of his life. And I've heard this in multiple occasions, and it sounds like such a blasphemy to think, oh, how can you have that much success in a short period of time, within a year or whatever, and it's horrible, right? And the concept of it makes sense though. So when I read about it, they talked about how, say you were living a regular life and whatever, right? And one day you won the lottery, right? That day, whatever day it was, would be one of the best days of your life. But because you won such a big lump sum of money, can that day ever really be topped? You literally won the lottery, won in whatever the probability is, a fucking super low probability or whatever. And so you would be that excited, you'd be super happy, you wouldn't have to work anymore, this and that, right? So that day, say your life was like this, right? It was just a steady little growth, like a typical pattern or whatever. That day you win the lottery, you would shoot like this, right? And now you're on top of the world, and yes, you have all the money, you have whatever, right? But after that day, your life can only go down this way, right? Because how can you ever have a day that exciting, that with that much dopamine, that much clout, whatever you want to call it, right? And that concept was for the lottery. And I was like, you can, when they scientifically explained this in the podcast and in the book, they were like, yeah, your life has to naturally go downwards, right? Because you have to come down from that dopamine high or whatever, right? And that makes sense. But then when this guy talked about it in a different circumstance where he was like, yeah, my whole life I just aimed to get these awards. I wanted to have the best bookseller and this and that. He had all these goalposts, which are good, have your goals, right? And when he achieved it all within that 1 year, it was horrible because he started changing all of his habits. He stopped writing as much. He stopped taking advice from other people because you just become so, how do I explain? You become so, you feel so good, and you grow your ego to a point where you don't even want to listen to other people and you don't want to take their advice. And even though people were telling him practical, good advice that he should be taking and taking advantage of, given the time period he was in, he wasn't listening to anyone. And he fell off course because, he was always busy doing this and that or whatever. And it's such an interesting concept because it makes sense in life. You're, every day, even the whole concept of Instagram, right? Where you look at other people's life and you're like, oh, that's a highlight, or as in it's such a good part, oh, they're getting married, they got a car, this and that, right? And it's that's such an artificial way to look at things because their life, whatever they did leading up to that point, has gotten to, that's a highlight of their life, but you're just seeing that little highlight. So you might see them in another week or another month or whatever doing something else that's really exciting, and so you're only seeing these things from them and you imagine their life to be super exciting and entertaining and this and that, but that's not the reality. It's just your perception of them, right? And the same thing goes with this whole idea of it looks like so much success, and from our perspective, right, we're not actually inside their lives. We're like, oh, they have such good things, they got the success, they got married, they have their car, they have all the money, whatever, right? But in reality, when they're actually living through it, it's not as compelling or enticing because you're everything for you is kind of changing, and on top of everything just changing, you might change your good habits or whatever the case may be, but there's nothing else for you to strive for. If you make all the money in the world and now you're oh, I don't need that much more money, there's not, what is your Northstar per se? I think he talked about that in the videos. Once you get all that success in such a short period of time, like I said, the dopamine has come down because you were on a high from whatever thing that you achieved. Naturally life has to come down, but also you lose your North Star. The whole point of people who are who say the journey is more important than the destination, or same thing, enjoy the process rather than the goal itself, and which is a very important thing to remember. He talked about if you have a goal to do whatever, right, be the best seller or become super fit, have abs, or have $1 million business, right, whatever day you might achieve that's only 1% of the whole journey, but the 99% is you working every single day towards that, right? So for you to be so excited by that 1% rather than the 99% makes almost no sense. And during that 99%, it is actually more exciting than the goal itself because you have a North Star. You wake up every day, you know what you're gonna do. You're okay, I'm gonna go to the gym. Oh, I'm gonna work on my business. I'm gonna write this book page or whatever the case may be, right? So if you can get yourself accustomed to the idea that let me enjoy the 99%, and when the 1% happens, because it will, because you're doing the things for a long enough period of time for it to happen, then when it happens, I'll be that much I'll be a little bit more excited, but I'm gonna have to set another big goal, or I'm gonna have to move the goalpost back or whatever. And that's why like all these guys who like aim to become millionaires, they become millionaires and they're like, wow, like that's it. Now what? And then they move the goalpost and they're like, okay, now I want 10 million. Then I want 100 million. And every time they reach these goals, they don't feel that much more excited or happy. It's just they need something to work towards, because the actual work that you do toward like pursuing something is actually the most exciting part. And if you have had any previous experience in like achieving a big goal, you'll understand this completely. It's like even with school, like imagine like if you go to high school or college, those 4 years you're just like, oh, I can't wait to graduate, and then when you graduate, like that excitement lasts like 5 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, maybe when you're just on the stage, maybe when you get your diploma. But then after that, you're like, well, now what? Now I have to go to college or whatever the case may be. And like even people who go to college and graduate, they're like, yeah, now what? It's like, and then they get so lost. Like now because they want another goal to like start working towards, they'll, instead of like going into the job field or like just taking a break, they go, let me go to grad school or whatever. Because, and that's like a very common scenario I've seen. Like people get so lost in time and they feel so lost because they have no Northstar, they have nothing to work towards, that they just apply to grad school because now they have another thing to work towards. Even if they didn't want to go to grad school or whatever, humans need to work, and humans need something to work towards, because if you have nothing to work towards, you're just distracted by everything and you just literally you do nothing all day. And it's like, I always bring this whole concept up of when people are like, oh, I want to be on vacation all the time, I don't want to work a job, this and that. It's like, I completely understand the like wanting freedom and this and that, but it's like you only enjoy vacation because you're working all the time. If you were always on vacation, you would not actually enjoy the vacation. It's like people who live on beach houses, they don't get excited to go to the beach, but all the people who don't live on beach houses, they love going to the beach, right? Because it's like, it's not so easily accessible. The things that like, if you're working 99% of the time and then you go on vacation 1%, it makes that 1% that much more enjoyable, but then you need to eventually go back to the 99% of working, or it doesn't add up, right? It's just how our brains are wired and work. And that's why it's so important for you to understand and get yourself, not to trick yourself, but to understand like, how can I get myself to enjoy the process rather than the goal? Like the goal, set it, have it there, and be like, okay, if I keep doing these things, if I have these inputs, the outcome will be the goal. So what are the inputs that I can do every single day for the rest of the time until I can get said goal, whether that's rich, be fit, married, write a book, whatever it is, doesn't matter. The outcome doesn't matter. The inputs are what matters. Enjoy what you do, have the right inputs, and make sure you enjoy doing them, because once you get the goal, no matter what it is, it will never be as enjoyable as a 99% of the time. We're all gonna fucking win. I'm telling you that. See you on the other side.